There are objects in JavaScript which are similar to both dictionaries and objects in Python. I can declare one using this brace notation. I can say, for example, name is, I don't know, doggy, and age is equal to 3, okay? And then I can say console.log, and we can use the dot notation to access the fields. Or if we wish, we can also use as notation the square bracket notation that is very similar to Python. Okay, so we can also do this. And so if I run this code, I will see doggy 3. Okay. Now, one subtle point is that these property names are always considered to be strings in Python. So if I do let object2 is equal to, and I say, for example, 1 is equal to a cat and 2 is equal to a dog, okay? I can access these in both ways via, for example, console.log object2 1. Okay, and then I can also write the same line with a string 2, and both of these lines will work because these tags for the object, these property names, will be converted to string before being used. Now I cannot run this code directly because it would give me an error for redeclaring object, so let me clear the memory. Okay, now I can run this, and you see I get cat due to this console log and then dog. Okay, and also create JavaScript objects on the fly by saying, for example, let object is equal to the empty object. Okay, and then I can say object dot name is equal to doggy, and object dot age is equal to 3. Okay, and this would have the same effect. So if I now point to the object, I will see that this is an object with the two fields, name and age, exactly as if I had built it all inside the braces. Let me define an object, ob, that has only one field, one attribute, val, whose value is 3, for instance. Now if I here say ob, okay, and I run this code, where I get that ob is an object with a value 3 in it. Okay. Now suppose I want to add here a method that I will call show that displays nicely what I have in the object. So I can define show to be a function. It's perfectly okay to have attributes that are functions. And here I can say, for example, console.log, okay, show plus, and here I would like to write val, because I would like these to refer to that. But I can't do this. If I run this code, I will get an error. In fact, perhaps we should get an error. Okay. So, well, there is no error because I don't call it. But if I do op.show, okay, I will get an undefined reference to this val. So how do I specify I want val of myself since I am in the object? I specify it by saying this.val. In JavaScript, this refers to the object that is enclosing the scope of the function that you are calling. Okay, so if I run this code now, let me erase to eliminate confusion, this would say show 3, which is what I want. I can write the same thing in a slightly different way if I want. That is, I can take this code, okay, cut and paste it. I can call this show2, just to keep the difference, okay, and then I can actually remove these. So this is a shorthand that also works. So I can say ob.show2, okay, and this will have the same effect. Let's see. Yes, show and show2 both work in the same way. Now there is another thing that we could do, and you could tell me, why don't you use the arrow notation? So instead of this, I cut and paste it again, okay, and I say that show, well, I could use the arrow notation, so I can say this arrow that, right? And I can call this show3 to avoid confusion again. So let me run this code, ob.show3, okay. And if I run this code, let me clear. Well, it doesn't quite work. You see, in show3 I write undefined. This in this arrow function is not defined. Essentially, when you use an arrow function, it does not create a context according to the object that encloses the arrow function. The people who use JavaScript think this is a feature. I actually think this is a horrible idea. I actually think that every asymmetry in a language is an invitation for bugs. And so you see that while in a normal context using function or arrow is equivalent, using function or arrow in the context of functions that are contained inside an object is not equivalent. The normal notation, this notation, creates this as a context referring to object, and then this.val has a meaning. The arrow notation does not create a context that can be grabbed by these, and so this.val will be undefined. A particular type of object in JavaScript is an array. You can create it simply by like this. A is equal to 234 in braces. So if you look at what A is, okay, you see that it's an array of 3 elements, and you can explore it, okay. There is a position 0 has value 2, position 1 has value 3, position 2 has value 4, and the length is equal to 3, okay. So you can see the attributes, okay. And there are 2 ways to iterate on it. You can say, for instance, for L in A, console.log of L. So if you do this, okay, you get the keys. Iterating using in gives you the keys. And if you instead iterate via off, you get the elements, which is what you perhaps expect. Okay? So if you do this, you get the elements 2, 3, 4. Okay? And let me delete for clarity. You can also loop in the traditional way. You can use an index that goes from 0. The index has to be smaller than a.length. Okay, and you increment the index. And here you can say, for example, console.log of I, a of I. So this is how you can explicitly address an array element if you know the index. Okay, and so if we run these, we see that this console log generates a key 0 has value 2, position 0 has value 2, position 1 has value 3, and position 2 has value 4, just as we wish. You can also create objects via functions. For example, we can say function user. It's a convention to use a capital letter at the beginning, name, and last, which is by this I mean last name, and I can say this dot name is equal to name, this dot last is equal to name, last. Okay. To create an object in this way, I can say object is equal to new. I use the special keyword new that will create this object, new user of like Luca Smith, okay. And then I can say, for example, ob.name, and this should give me Luca, right? Yes, this works. So this is a way to write object generating functions.